Hello and welcome back to RPG PhD. I'm Dr. Ben. Today we're going to steal a set of tools from psychology and apply them directly to tabletop role-playing games. Body language and nonverbal communication. Most game masters spend a lot of prep time on what NPCs say. Dialogue, accents, lore, carefully written clues. Players, though, read something else first. They track posture, they notice pauses, they clock where an NPC's eyes go when a certain name comes up. Tiny physical details shape trust, suspicion, and tension before any dice hit the table. The core question for this episode is simple. How can small physical cues make NPCs feel truthful, deceptive, powerful, or cornered without requiring constant skill checks? So, sit back, relax, and let's get started. When psychologists study deception and emotion, they keep running into the same problem. Humans are excellent at controlling what they say and far less consistent at controlling what their bodies do. That gap is where tension, fear, confidence, and calculation leak out in physical form. The theoretical backbone here comes from the research of Paul Ekman, whose work on facial expression and emotional leakage is laid out in Emotions Revealed. Ekman and collaborators studied how feelings show up in the body even when people attempt to hide them, through muscle tension, timing, gaze, and micro movements that slip past conscious control. These studies show that emotions correspond to specific patterns of muscle activation around the eyes, mouth, and brow, and that those patterns can flash across a face even when someone attempts to present a calm exterior. For tabletop purposes, the exact muscle groups matter less than the principle behind them. Emotional states often register physically before a person can edit them. Stress speeds up breathing, fear tightens shoulders, confidence spreads someone out in their chair. Cognitive load changes speech rhythm. Attention pulls the eyes toward threats, exits, or protected objects. These reactions happen because bodies evolve to prepare for action before language catches up, and they tend to persist even in people who are practiced liars or skilled negotiators. That distinction is crucial for running NPCs. Dialogue represents intention, physicality reveals pressure. An NPC might rehearse a story perfectly while their foot keeps bouncing under the table. A noble might maintain a pleasant smile while answering too quickly when a forbidden name comes up. Everything's in order, the guard says, though his body stays canted toward the hall behind him, fingers locked around his spear, eyes flicking back to the darkness past the door. None of those cues declare guilt or innocence on their own. They announce that something in the situation is loading the NPC emotionally. For game masters, this becomes a useful design lever. You don't need to label the emotions directly. You describe breathing, posture, hand movement, and timing, then allow players to interpret. That interpretive work creates engagement. Players lean forward, they take notes, they start testing hypotheses through play. The science supports that approach because humans are already trained subconsciously to read bodies as sources of information long before words finish forming. At the table, that research gives game masters a useful idea. NPCs can manage their words, their bodies tell stories. We're going to translate that into 4 concrete game master tools using micro behaviors during interrogations, planting tells in negotiations, signaling social status through posture and movement, and letting physical description create lies players can probe before rolling. So let's translate that research into something you can actually use at the table. I'm going to use the term micro-behavior to mean a small, repeatable physical action that shows up when an NPC feels pressure. These are not grand gestures or theatrical meltdowns, they are tiny habits. A jaw tightening before an answer, fingers worrying the edge of a sleeve, a breath that catches just a beat too long. Weight shifting from foot to foot, eyes sliding toward the door whenever a particular topic surfaces. Interrogation scenes are ideal laboratories for this because stakes are explicit and attention is focused. Interrogation in tabletop play refers to any scene in which characters deliberately apply social pressure through conversation, positioning, incentives, or threat to extract information someone would rather keep hidden. Whether that happens in a dungeon cell, a courtly banquet, a roadside chat, or a quiet drink at the bar. Someone wants information. Someone else wants to control what gets revealed. That tension loads the body. When you give an NPC one of these physical habits and let it surface consistently, players begin to triangulate meaning. The first appearance feels like color. The second registers as pattern. The third becomes a clue. A useful prep shortcut here is what I call pick one pressure valve. Before the scene starts, choose a single behavior that expresses how this NPC handles stress. One character rubs their thumb along a signet ring whenever they hedge. Another keeps smoothing the front of their coat. A third answers while exhaling, like they are releasing air they did not realize they were holding. You need one physical outlet that keeps returning when the questioning tightens. In play, you seed it gently. He responds at once, one finger making a small, almost unconscious tick on the table. When the caravan comes up, the tapping repeats, 2 quick beats before his answer. A few questions later, it turns into a jittery rhythm, and he eases his chair backward until the legs scrape. You never announce what that behavior means, you let the table infer. That inference process creates tension because players feel as though they are doing investigative work rather than waiting for permission to roll. This approach also keeps interrogation scenes from collapsing into binary success checks. Description shapes choice. Players decide whether to lean in, change tactics, threaten, reassure, or bring up a new topic. The dice still matter. They come in after commitment when uncertainty remains. The micro-behaviors give players something to react to before mechanics resolve the outcome. One important discipline here involves restraint. A single strong cue outperforms a cascade of gestures. If every sentence comes with 3 physical tells, the signal blurs into noise. Focus on one channel of leakage and let silence do some of the work around it. A pause followed by a habitual movement often carries more weight than a paragraph of explanation. Negotiation scenes work on the same psychological substrate as interrogations, though the emotional cocktail shifts. Instead of fear alone, you often get calculation, pride, desperation, irritation, and sudden hope colliding in real time. Research on emotion expression and regulation, summarized by Ekman, shows that people attempt to manage what they reveal in high-stakes social situations, yet physical cues still slip through when effort and stress rise. Those slips create the texture you can use as a game master. At the table, negotiations benefit from contrast. Bodies broadcast advantage and disadvantage before terms settle. When an NPC believes they hold leverage, you can let that show through stillness, slow movements, relaxed sprawl in a chair, or the casual way they allow silence to stretch after a player speaks. When the balance tips against them, the tempo changes. Speech accelerates, explanations lengthen. Politeness sharpens into formality. Hands start to fuss with goblets, documents, jewelry, or the edge of a sleeve. None of these require you to state emotional labels. They let the players read the room. You can make this concrete by preparing a simple baseline for the NPC before the scene begins. Decide how they look when calm and confident. Perhaps the guildmaster leans back with one arm draped over the chair and answers only after a thoughtful pause. Once that baseline exists, deviations become more legible. The arm comes off the chair, the pauses shrink, the NPC interrupts instead of waiting. Players register that something in the conversation has shifted. This technique pairs especially well with bargaining over price, access, or favors. So imagine a smuggler who starts the meeting lounging against a pillar, boots crossed at the ankle, voice unhurried. After the party mentions a rival crew, you describe his heel uncrossing, his shoulders squaring, his hand flattening against the stone behind him as though checking for distance. Players now have new information. They can pivot tactics, press harder, or change the subject. It helps to remember that tells in negotiations do not point only toward weakness. Sudden confidence can carry meaning as well. An NPC who straightens, slows down, and begins choosing words carefully may have gained leverage. Someone who smiles more broadly and mirrors the player's posture might be attempting to smooth over perceived danger. These cues indicate pressure and strategy rather than truthfulness in any simple moral sense. For game masters, the discipline again lies in selectivity. Pick 2 or 3 physical dimensions, things like tempo, posture, and hands. These work well, and let changes along those axes signal shifts in the invisible math of the scene. Players will start mapping that body level information onto their plans, which turns negotiation into an active tactical exchange instead of a sequence of isolated persuasion checks. Long before people exchange words, they register rank. Anthropologists and psychologists studying nonverbal communication have consistently found that posture, spatial occupation, movement speed, and patterns of interruption correlate with perceived dominance and submission in social groups. Burgoon and Hale discuss these signals alongside similar observations across research on social signaling and power dynamics in face-to-face interaction. For tabletop play, the exact academic framework matters less than the repeatable pattern. Bodies organize themselves around hierarchy even when nobody names it. At the table, you can exploit that instinct by letting physical description establish status before dialogue begins. High-status NPCs tend to move less and take up more space. They sit while others stand. They allow people to approach them. Their gaze stays level. They turn their heads slowly rather than snapping it toward whoever speaks. Subordinates cluster, angle their bodies inward, wait for cues before talking, or glance sideways for permission before answering questions. When the party enters a throne room, council chamber, guild hall, or criminal den, you can communicate who matters simply by narrating who shifts position and who remains still. This works especially well in multi-NPC scenes. Picture a mercenary company receiving the party. One soldier steps forward to greet them, yet keeps glancing back over his shoulder. Another leans on a spear and watches without speaking. A third sits on a crate sharpening a blade, eyes never leaving the newcomers. When that seated figure finally looks up and speaks, players immediately recalibrate. You have drawn the hierarchy without stating it outright. Status posture also helps sell institutions. In courts, clerks hover and scribes bend over desks while nobles recline. In temples, acolytes flow around a still central priest. In military briefings, officers stand at ease while everyone else snaps to attention. These patterns anchor fiction and prevent players from having to ask, who's actually in charge here? You can make this systematic with a fast prep trick. Assign every important NPC in a scene one of 3 physical modes: expansive, neutral, or contracted. Expansive figures occupy space and move deliberately. Neutral figures mirror whoever they speak to and keep balanced posture. Contracted figures fold inward, minimize their footprint, and defer physically before they defer verbally. Once play begins, you adjust that mode only when something genuinely changes. A lieutenant who straightens and steps forward after the captain falters tells a story through motion alone. Status cues also provide pressure points for players. Characters can challenge hierarchy by refusing to sit when offered, stepping into someone's personal space, or remaining silent until addressed. When you respond physically, guards shifting, scribes freezing, courtiers backing away, you turn social conflict into embodied action rather than abstract roles. This final tool pulls the previous 3 together and reframes how social mechanics function at the table. Ekman emphasizes that deceptive behavior rarely appears as a single, definitive signal. Instead, people juggle 3 things at once: what they intend to project, the emotional pressure they feel, and the physical leakage that pressure creates. For game masters, this becomes a way to stage uncertainty rather than resolve it instantly. You describe the surface performance, the practiced smile, the steady voice, the polite phrasing. Then you layer in 1 or 2 physical cues that suggest strain: a blink rate that spikes when a certain detail comes up, a breath taken before answering a simple question, a foot that keeps tapping against the leg of the chair. Those cues do not announce deception. They announce load. Something in the situation matters to the NPC, and the players get to decide what that means. This approach shifts when dice enter the scene. Physical description generates choices. Players decide whether to change topics, bring up a name they have been circling, offer reassurance, threaten consequences, or request proof. Once they commit to a tactic, mechanical resolution clarifies the outcome. The fiction leads. The rules adjudicate afterward. That ordering preserves player agency and keeps social scenes from collapsing into immediate binary tests. You can structure this deliberately with what I call a 3-layer description. The first layer is the controlled exterior. The merchant smiles easily and keeps his hands folded on the table. The second layer, the leak. At the mention of the warehouse, his heel begins tapping under the chair, slow at first, then quicker, like he's trying to stop it and failing. And then the third layer, the context that gives the cue meaning, such as proximity to guards, the presence of allies, or the risk of being overheard. None of these layers resolve the mystery on their own. Together, they invite experimentation. So consider a short example. The innkeeper insists the upstairs rooms are empty. You add that he answers before the question finishes and keeps glancing towards the stairwell behind him. Players now hold actionable information. They might split up, stake out the stairs, soften their tone, or escalate. The physicality has already reshaped the scene before any insight-type roll lands on the table. 2 cautions keep this technique healthy. First, rotate your cues. If every liar rubs their hands, players learn the code instead of reading the fiction. Second, remember that stress and deception overlap without equaling each other. An honest NPC under threat may show the same physical strain as a practiced criminal. Avoid turning body language into a mechanical shortcut. Confident antagonists often show very little outward strain, while truthful NPCs under threat can display the same nervous behaviors as someone hiding something. So rotate physical cues from scene to scene so patterns stay grounded in character rather than becoming a table-wide code, and anchor those behaviors in temperament, training, and circumstance rather than moral alignment. The principle to keep in mind is simple. Body language shows pressure, not guilt. When used carefully, these descriptions turn NPCs into moving systems rather than static dialogue boxes. The table starts interrogating posture, tempo, and spatial relationships the same way they interrogate alibis. That kind of attention creates immersion because players feel as though the world is responding moment by moment, even when nobody has rolled yet. So now let's take a look at how to put this into practical use at the table. Let's zoom out and turn everything from this episode into a repeatable how-to process you can run during prep and improvise with during play. The 4 tools, micro behaviors, negotiation tells, status posture, and layered physical description work best when they operate together rather than in isolation. Think of them as 4 dials you can adjust in any social scene to create pressure, legibility, and player choice. So we'll start with tool 1, micro behaviors. Before the scene begins, decide on one small physical habit that surfaces when this NPC feels stressed. Keep it narrow and bodily. A thumb worrying a ring, breath releasing before answers, eyes drifting towards exits, knuckles whitening around a mug. Write that habit in your notes next to the NPC's name. When questioning tightens or danger rises, let the same action return. Introduce it lightly at first, then repeat it with greater intensity as the PCs push harder. During play, resist explaining what the habit means. Describe it, pause, and let the table react. Players will test that signal through new tactics, and that experimentation becomes the engine of the scene. Tool number 2, negotiation tells. At the start of bargaining, establish how the NPC behaves when comfortable. Perhaps they lean back, speak slowly, or let silences stretch. That becomes your baseline. As offers change or threats surface, adjust posture and tempo rather than volume of dialogue. Speeding speech, longer justifications, sudden politeness, or hands fussing with objects can all signal a weakening position. Stillness, slower movement, and controlled eye contact often accompany growing confidence. During the scene, watch for moments when the players land a point or lose ground, then answer with a physical shift before any verbal concession follows. Tool number 3, Status posture whenever multiple NPCs share a space. Decide in advance who occupies authority and how that authority appears physically. Some figures sit while others stand. Some take up space at the center of the room while others hover at the edges. Some wait to speak. Others interrupt without apology. Open the scene by describing those arrangements and who moves when the party enters. During play, let challenges to hierarchy register through bodies first. Guards straighten. Courtiers freeze. Subordinates glance sideways for permission. When someone new takes control, adjust who stays still and who starts shifting. That physical choreography teaches the party where power sits without requiring exposition. And use tool 4, layered physical description, to control when dice enter the conversation. Frame important moments with 3 passes of information. First, describe the NPC's controlled exterior: voice steady, smile polite, posture composed. Second, add 1 physical cue that hints at internal load: breath hitching, heel tapping, shoulders tightening. Third, anchor that cue in the scene's context, such as nearby allies, an open doorway, or a dangerous topic. Then stop. Give players space to react before asking for a roll. When they choose a tactic, that's when mechanics clarify the outcome. Description generates decisions. Dice resolve uncertainty afterward. During play, cycle among these 4 tools instead of dumping them all at once. Pressure brings back the micro behavior. A change in leverage alters negotiation posture. A challenge to authority reshapes the room. Layered cues invite new player action. This approach scales easily. For a throwaway guard, you might pick a single stress habit and a rough status level, then move on. For a recurring rival or major patron, track patterns across sessions. A nervous tick might fade as they grow powerful. Someone who once hovered near exits may begin blocking doorways. A former subordinate might start taking the central chair during meetings. Those bodily arcs communicate development, again without speeches, letting players feel the campaign world evolving. One final rule keeps the whole system honest. Body language communicates pressure, strategy, and emotional load rather than moral truth. Innocent people under threat look nervous. Skilled deceivers sometimes remain outwardly calm. Ground every cue in personality, training, and circumstance instead of alignment. When ambiguity stays intact, players remain investigators rather than code breakers. Now we'll talk about some GM homework. Here are 3 things to try in your next session. Give 1 NPC a single stress tell and repeat it whenever questioning tightens. During one negotiation, establish a physical baseline early and describe how it shifts after a key reveal. Run 1 social scene using description alone for the first few exchanges before calling for a roll. And watch how quickly players start circling those cues and testing them through play. If this episode sparked ideas, give the video a like, subscribe for more tabletop theory heists, and share it with the game master in your group who loves running tense social scenes. I would love to hear in the comments what physical tells you have used at your own table, or the moment a player caught onto one and flipped an entire negotiation because of it. And as always, thanks for watching. See you next time.